I'll just enter one caveat. Caveat is the fancy word for exception. Not exception, I would call it just a caution. Mill is kind of the old school of thought. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. I'm just going to articulate his mindset. He's of the mindset that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never harm me. He doesn't believe in the notion, which has become a kind of commonplace of current culture, that hurling epithets or making statements which you might find personally offensive, he does not accept that that is a harm. Harm consists in some form of physical or violent blow, but it can't consist merely, I put merely in quotes because some people might take offense at the merely, it cannot consist merely in what we now would call psychological damage, we might call it emotional damage. He does not accept those forms of damage as constituting damage or harm. The only harm or damage he's willing to accept is some kind of physical blow. Whether he's right or wrong, I think it's a complicated question. However, as we go along, I will try to show that using the argument of emotional and psychological damage, it inevitably and invariably produces a sterile intellectual culture. Because there's always going to be someone or someones who take offense, personal offense, at any idea to which they find wrong or personally offensive. And it ends up, I think, we call it in the United States, and I suspect we call it here also, political correctness. It produces a kind of political correctness which is stifling to any kind of debate, any kind of vigorous intellectual debate. The problem with the politically correct people, in my opinion, is they don't apply that rule, which I mentioned that has to be applied across the board. Namely, if you want to use this principle of causing emotional and psychological harm, then you have to take into account our emotional and psychological harm. If you're going to say that we have the right to speak about abortion because women should have the right to choose, well, can't a Christian have the right of veto, a devout Christian, on the grounds that they think that's the equivalent of infanticide? It's murdering children. That is a deeply felt belief. If we have the right to suspend speech which hurts the feelings of others, then shouldn't we have the right to then suspend any discussion of abortion, which for a deeply believing Christian is a deeply offensive idea. It's infanticide, or a version of infanticide. I, in my adult life, was constantly confronted with the fact, because I spoke to mostly Jewish universities in New York, that what I had to say about Israel, the Jewish students found deeply, even mortally offensive. Was that a legitimate grounds for suspending my right to express my opinion? if you're using the standard of emotional and psychological damage, and you use that standard not selectively, but you use it across the board, I think it's then true I shouldn't have had that right. The problem is politically correct people, mostly liberals and leftists, they think you have the right to offend others because their beliefs are backward. But they can't attack you because your beliefs are progressive. But once you start using the standard across the board, you're going to quickly discover that you can't say anything either.